Shrek is not a fairy tale. It's a cautionary tale, an example of how a woman cannot turn an ogre into a man, but he can make an ogre out of you.
I don't think you've ever watched a single second of a Shrek movie in your life, and honestly, that is the best case scenario here. Alternative is, this is a pretty vile and discriminatory, insidious take that only really the Emerald Fennels of the world would probably have. That video has 1.6 million likes, which I'm assuming are largely from Americans, which is a great reminder that America is 21% functionally illiterate, and Americans cannot remember a single goddamn thing. This video is a great reminder. You can get on here and say pretty much anything, even if it's not even remotely based in fact. The follow-up video, you made the statement that Shrek is not a fairy tale for some reason. That is to misunderstand the entirety of Shrek, because Shrek is a fairy tale. It simply is just reframing many elements of traditional fairy tales. But what Disney did to actual fairy tales from the Brothers Grimm, etc., is take them and bastardize them and water them down and basically turn them into stories for idiots. I made like an 8-minute long video before about how Disney took the story of Pinocchio and turned it into something that had the exact opposite message of the original story. Operating on the premise that Shrek is not a fairy tale, your take is fundamentally broken. Started by saying that Fiona started out as a princess and she had generational wealth. But to say that Fiona had generational wealth is to misunderstand the societal hierarchy that a story like this is based upon, being a medieval princess. She's basically used as a bargaining chip or as a king-making tool in the first 2 films by 2 different men. Generational wealth implies that that wealth is actually meaningful, that you have the independence to go spend it and use it, right, and do something with it. What does the generational wealth of your family matter when you're basically being viewed as property by a Lord Farquaad? She ran away from her family and found some normal man to marry, which is kind of what you're advocating for here. She wouldn't get any of that generational wealth, right, because it's not hers. Her parents, especially Harold, up until his redemption, view her as a bargaining chip, as a tool to use. Most likely what happened is the fairy godmother made a deal with Harold that she will turn him from a frog to a human being if he makes this deal around his firstborn child. The deal was that Fiona would end up with Prince Charming. This is just how fairy tales go, right? The point you made that makes me feel like you haven't watched the films is that she alienated her family to be with Shrek and go to the swamp. This is her family, right? This is the most racist moment in the entire film, with her father basically shitting on Shrek this entire dinner. These are the types of people that you're worried about her alienating. Types of people that use her as a bargaining chip. Make a point to come back and say she chooses to live in a swamp instead of a castle. Existing in a castle would be existing basically as a pawn in somebody else's game. The entire point of this version of Fiona is she is putting on an act. That's kind of the beauty of Shrek. She's playing a character. She's playing the damsel in distress. Genuine about this version of Fiona. She's simply fitting the mold that she thinks she's supposed to fit. Shrek, they genuinely fall in love because she sees that she can just kind of be herself around this guy, let out little bits of her actual personality. They make each other laugh, they get along, they're playful. This is a fun dynamic that actually develops in a genuine way. The element here is she knows that at night she turns into an ogre. This is someone that would obviously accept her. I say accept her, it's because you fundamentally misunderstand the spell that she's under. You seem to think that if her true love had been a man, she would then turn into a woman and take love's true form. Her true form is an ogre. That is what her genuine personality reflects. We see this over and over again. It's the point of the entire story. Not literally saying that you would take the form of the other person. If she found a man and it was true love, it would be a man that accepted the fact that at night she turned into an ogre. So again, she would still turn into an ogre. Back to Shrek, you keep defining him as unemployed, as if this describes his entire existence. You keep saying he's unemployed like anyone gives a flying fuck, like employment dictates happiness in this imaginary fantasy animated world. Life is not about the stuff you have or your job, it's about how you live. This is a guy who not only owns his own home, he owns the land that he's on. He provides for himself, he has food, he does the same thing for his family. You're presenting him like he's living in some kind of disgusting lifestyle. This is how Shrek lives by himself. A nice little meal here, got some flowers going, some beverages, he's got a fork and a knife. This is a guy who's kind of thriving. Shrek is comfortable being by himself, just like Fiona is, and they both know who they are, so when they come together, they're ready to go. Also described him as an antisocial outcast who lives in a swamp. You may have missed this, but he's actually an ogre. He's actively being hunted. People are trying to murder him where he lives on his own property pretty much at all times. time simply for how he was born. Someone who is discriminated against for existing. You're supposed to have pity on Shrek in the film, right? You caught this? Very largely about discrimination and not judging a book by its cover. Ironically, your take is one I feel that a Lord Farquaad might actually have if he was watching the film in this universe. Also said now she's an ogre, so this is going to severely limit her options in the dating pool moving forward. This is a weird take. I called out a guy who kind of was saying the same thing. If you're with someone and thinking about, oh, well, what about the next person I'm going to be with? Something is actually wrong with you, and you're also not in love. She is in love with Shrek, and Shrek loves her. Who also said that Shrek is not willing to change himself or level up for her. After the racist-ass dinner, what happens is Fiona calls out Shrek's behavior. Shrek thinks about it and says, yeah, basically I was wrong. Harold comes and visits him and asks him to go out on a hunt the next morning. He is kind to Harold and says yes, despite this disgusting behavior. And then Harold tries to have him assassinated. And then Shrek's response to his future father-in-law trying to murder him is to say, maybe I can try to change and become a man, and then it'll be okay. He goes on a dangerous mission to the fairy godmother's factory, and he finds a potion that he doesn't know what it's going to do to him and just takes it. At the end of the film, he says, if this is what you want, I will stay in this form. He will give up his identity for Fiona. Fiona chooses their life together because they are actually happy and confident in who they are. When they try to sell Prince Charming as Shrek, Shrek literally sees this and makes a terrible decision, in my opinion, and says, well, if this makes Fiona happy, I guess that's fine. This is what she wants. Also said Shrek baby traps her, which is a very odd term to use in general, but especially odd here because it has nothing to do with the reality of the film. Shrek 3 basically opens up with a conversation between Shrek and Fiona, and she's kind of asking him, how do you feel about us having kids? She's clearly excited about it, and Shrek is nervous. When he's going away on his mission to find Arthur, she basically tells him that he's pregnant, and he's once again nervous. The entire film is very much coming to terms with that fact about him being unsure about being a father. To say that Fiona baby traps him is absolutely absurd, and again has nothing to do with the film. I think Shrek 3 is a great film. Fiona has a really fun arc kind of rallying the Disney princesses and getting them to think outside the box and take action and be active participants in the story rather than having the story drive them. And Shrek, meanwhile, is processing what it means to be a father, not because he's afraid of commitment or afraid of the responsibility, but rather because he understands how his own father treated him. We see his trauma kind of appearing in the story. To me, it's very interesting because we're seeing Shrek basically thinking about ogres in the same way that society thinks about ogres, because he had a bad experience with his own father who literally tried to kill him. And Shrek 3 tackles all this stuff fully in detail, but you are speaking very confidently about this film and him baby trapping her, when again, it has nothing to do with the film, so I don't think you actually watched it. So why are you talking about it, and where is your information coming from? About Shrek 3 is it shows how stuffy this lifestyle is, how it does not fit them. It's not what they actually want as people. I don't think Shrek 4 is a great movie. It shows that Fiona, even without Shrek, would still eventually become an ogre, and she's an ogre who is leading basically this entire rebellion and kind of driving her own story forward. Even in this other dimension, this other reality, her and Shrek are still drawn together because they are meant to be in this kind of fairy tale world. The question once again needs to be asked, what in God's name are you talking about?